The reason being that we made an amendment to clause 17 of it to make it clear that persons involved in procurement procedures in Jamaica who are resident outside of Jamaica will not need to apply for a TCC in order to participate in the procurement process. So I ask that that be withdrawn, Mr. Speaker.
Order. Is this the wish of the House that the order be withdrawn? Those in favor? Those against?
Mr. Speaker, I now ask for the recommittal of items, announcements, and notices of motion given.
Mr. Semuda.
Yes.
I wish to announce the result of.
Oh, I thought you had said all those in favor. I had
the ayes have
prevailed.
Go ahead, no, Mr. Semuda.
I now ask that for the recommittal of the items, announcements, and notices of motion given orally.
Announcements.
Also laid on the table of the House today are the following: the Public Procurement Regulations 2018 under the Public Procurement Act.
Notice of motion given orally.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of this House, I'll move the following. I'll move the following motion: that the Public Procurement Reconsideration and Review Regulations 2018 be approved in this House. And Mr. Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I'll move for suspension of the standing orders to allow me to take this motion.
Those in favor? Aye. Those against? Ayes have it. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, further to the deliberations and subsequent passage of the Public Procurement Amendment Bill, I now stand to present on 2 of the 3 sets of regulations to this Honourable House for affirmative resolution that are required in order to operationalize provisions of the Public Procurement Act. The Public Procurement Regulations 2018 and the Public Procurement Reconsideration and Review Regulations 2018 have been made pursuant to Section 60 of the Act. And such regulations, Mr. Speaker, aim to prescribe the provisions in relation to, among other things, the procedures, standards, and criteria for the various methods and subject matter of procurement, the establishment, management, and operation of an electronic procurement system, overall bidding proceedings, and an appeals mechanism. The third set of regulations, Mr. Speaker, entitled the Public Procurement Registration and Classification of Suppliers Regulations 2018, are to be made pursuant to Section 61 of the Public Procurement Act, which gives the Public Procurement Commission the authority to make its own regulations. I take this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to also put this Honourable House on notice that these regulations will be tabled for affirmative resolution upon the promulgation of the Act. Mr. Speaker, these regulations are considered critical to the operations of the public procurement as they address the concerns of suppliers. And Mr. Speaker, that is to come, just to make that clear. That's the third, but today we're dealing with the first 2. So, the first of those 2, the Public Procurement Regulations. Mr. Speaker, the Public Procurement Regulations 2018 is considered the principal regulation which prescribes provisions as are authorized by Section 60. And these matters relate specifically, Mr. Speaker, to the procedures, standards, and criteria for the various methods and subject matter of procurement, the bidding processes and procedures, the provision of bid security, performance security, and any other security required in connection with procurement proceedings, and the execution of procurement contracts. and it also deals with the special and differential measures, as well as any other thing required to be prescribed under the Public Procurement Act. Now, Mr. Speaker, it deals with Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3, and I don't propose necessarily to go through all of them. I don't think that is, or Part 4, I don't think all of that will be necessary, Mr. Speaker. What I would like to do is to put the first regulation, the public procurement regulation, to put the public procurement regulations resolution 2018, which is, whereas by virtue of section 60 subsection 1 of the Public Procurement Act, hereinafter referred to as the Act, the Minister may make such regulations as he thinks fit to give full effect to the provisions of the Act, and without prejudice to the foregoing, may prescribe provisions in relation to matters specified in paragraphs A to J of section 60 subsection 1, and whereas on the 3rd day of July 2018, the Minister made the Public Procurement Regulations 2018, and whereas it is provided by section 60 subsection 2 of the Act that regulations made under paragraph A, C, F, and G of section 60 subsection 1 of the Act shall be subject to affirmative resolution, now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows. This resolution may be cited as the Public Procurement Regulations Resolution 2018, and the Public Procurement Regulations 2018, which was laid on the table of this House on this, the 3rd day of July 2018, are hereby confirmed.
Those in favor? Those against? As of it. Minister, you see the next one.
So now, Mr. Speaker, I would like to address the second resolution, which is the Public Procurement Reconsideration and Review Regulations 2018, which were tabled in this House last week. Mr. Speaker, the Public Procurement Reconsideration and Review Regulation 2018 provide for the very important process of reconsideration of an action or decision taken by a procurement entity. And this is a very important advancement in the procurement process. So, Mr. Speaker, I would like to I'd like to now invite members of this Honourable House to support the affirmation of these regulations.
Those in favor?
Yes, yes.
Those against? The ayes have it.
All right. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to indicate that I'm about to take the motion on the order of business item number 14, which is the Civil Service Establishment General Order 2018 resolution. Mr. Speaker, in accordance with the Civil Service Establishment Act of 1976, the Civil Service Establishment General Order 2018 has been prepared and was presented and is being presented here today again to indicate changes to the Civil Service Establishment General Order of 2017. The Civil Service Establishment General Order of 2018 outlines the reorganization of ministries and departments and consequently the creation of new posts, the abolition of posts based on reorganization, and the reclassification, upgrading, and retitling of existing posts to achieve desired results. The major changes, Mr. Speaker, to be effective in the General Order of 2018 include, 1, a restructuring of the Office of the Services Commission to allow for the delegation and monitoring of the HR functions in government in order to support the GOJ's HR operations framework and to enable the Office of the Service Commission in becoming a center of expertise for the GOJ HR community. As a result, 33 new posts were created, 37 upgraded, 46 retitled, and 7 posts reclassified. the retitling and restructuring of the educational number 2, the retitling and restructuring of Educational Services Division to the Division of School Services under the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, which sees the creation of 41 new posts to improve turnaround time and reduce bureaucratic delays through the application of a flatter organizational structure, which sees greater authority being given to the regional directors. Number 3, the revision of the Finance and Accounts Division in the Department of Correctional Services, which results in the creation of 18 new posts, reclassification of 35 posts, the retitling of 44, and upgrading of 8. This will enable correctional officers now engaged in carrying out accounting functions to be reassigned in keeping with their training, and that there is full compliance with the requirement of the FAA Act and its regulation for all its staff handling cash to be employed in an establishment post. And number 4, the retitling of 32 posts under the Ministry of Industry, Commerce, Agriculture and Fisheries that will streamline job titles to more accurately reflect the functions being performed. The General Order, Mr. Speaker, reflects changes in 3 areas. Part 1, the section allows for changes in the complement of posts in ministries and departments, and it reflects changes in posts, for example, reclassification of posts, new posts created, and retitling of posts and upgrading of posts, and the effective dates for these changes. The breakdown, Mr. Speaker, is as follows. 132 new posts were created, 72 new posts were upgraded, and 56 new posts were reclassified, and a total of 172 posts were retitled. In the appendix to Part 1, Mr. Speaker, this section shows the revised allowances for the 2017 contract period, and Part 2, Mr. Speaker, this section shows the revision of the salaries for 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020 contract period, consequent upon the heads of agreement signed between the government of Jamaica and various unions and bargaining groups. And Part 3, Mr. Speaker, speaks to abolitions. This section shows that 7 posts were abolished from the establishment of several ministries and departments. The affirmative resolution is therefore sought for the Civil Service Establishment General Order 2018. I therefore close the debate, Mr. Well, go ahead.
Mr. Daly, turn your mic on. And
we have no difficulty with the resolution as outlined by the minister. This is something we do regularly. This is something that I have done on many occasions to streamline and to make the public service more effective. We are grateful that it is being continued. It's a regular thing, and we have no objection.
So, just ask you for the permission, just having heard you from
well, having heard me, Mr. Speaker, and I'm sure you heard me, I retroactively ask you for permission to speak from a seat other than my own, which you granted by nodding. Minister, no problem.
Mr. Speaker, I humbly ask that the motion be approved.
those in favor? Those against? As of it. Before you proceed, I must apologize to a number of our guests who are here today, former senators and other officials, that we did not welcome you earlier, but I'm sure you enjoy the debate today, and I ask the House to welcome you with a round of applause at this time. Mr. Samuda.
Mr. Speaker, well, no, I tell you why. I tell you what is the problem we have. There are some invited professionals who have come here to observe and to share in the presentation of at least one of the speakers. No. The Attorney General's chambers. They're all here. And so it would be a great inconvenience to them for having shared this with us and then to say they have to come back on. So I prevail upon you. I prevail upon you to allow us to proceed hopefully with a sense of alacrity. I vehemently implore you to be consistent with the provisions in terms of time. And so, Minister Olivia Grange, if this brief is a prelude to what is to come with these icons on the front page, we have a lot to look forward to. Madam Minister, please make your presentation.
Minister Babs Grange.
You can put that one and sit in this one. Mr. Speaker, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I must say to my colleagues that after I filled the gallery and gave them the largest audience they've ever had in a long time, they all choose to leave after they have kept all my people here and me waiting for a long time. Now, no man or woman get up now, okay? Right, that's an order.
That was not very nice for the lady.
Mr. Speaker, it is my greatest privilege to represent the hardworking and dedicated people of Central St. Catherine for the past 20 years. I thank them all for their love and confidence as we continue to work together to transform the constituency of Central St. Catherine. We will continue to rise, yes, and we will continue to keep the peace. I wish to thank my councillors, Theresa Turner, George Moody, and Kenisha Allen, for working with me as a team to bring about meaningful change in the constituency. I will be participating in the constituency debate, which comes later on in this year. And so, although there is so much to say, so many things to say right now, I will wait until that time to speak to all the achievements of the constituency of Central St. Catherine. I thank Prime Minister, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, for his confidence in allowing me to oversee and manage the portfolios of culture, gender, entertainment, and sport, which I refer to as For the Hard Way. I thank my colleagues in the Cabinet and in Parliament, my Minister of State, new kid on the block in my ministry, members of various boards and councils, the permanent secretary and staff of the ministry and its agencies, my close protection officers, and personal assistants for their unwavering support. Mr. Speaker, I must also acknowledge my family. And in the gallery is my daughter, Paula Surtees, and my granddaughter, Anna Surtees. And, Mr. Speaker, I must say I'm a proud great-grandmother. I have 2 great-grands. I also want to acknowledge the General Manager of the Jamaica Association of Composers, Authors, and Publishers, who is here in the gallery, and also the General Manager for Jam Copy. I also wish to acknowledge former Senator, the first Rasta and only Rasta to serve in Parliament, real Rasta. Former Senator Barbara Blake Hanna. And when I say, Mr. Speaker, real Rasta, I'm speaking of a woman, an empress who was there from the beginning, a member of the delegation that went to Ethiopia to look at how Rasta could go back to Ethiopia in those days and those discussions. Tisha Shema, yes. Well, there are those who may have gone at that time, but they don't have the locks, they don't have the tradition, and they're certainly not living the life anymore of Rastafari. They have lost their way. What they've done now, they're part of this parliament, and they are living another life. So in this chamber, Mr. Speaker, we do have those who respect and honor Rasta. I also want to acknowledge Senator Karencia Morrison, who is somewhere in the precinct of the House, and Queen's Counsel Frank Phipps from the National Council on Reparations. There are many other notable individuals here this afternoon, and I want to thank them for staying around. I commend with pride the work being done by the many stakeholders, creative practitioners, artists, entertainers, cultural communities, sportsmen and women, gender specialists and activists, to keep the creative sector as the backbone of Jamaica's global identity. I welcome the many Jamaicans at home and abroad who are watching us live, and I'd say live and direct because that was really the title of the shows that I promoted in the early days until my friends on the other side took the slogan. And they're watching us on PBCJ and on my ministry's website. The ministry which I have the privilege to lead is committed to creating the environment for us to rise to even greater heights. The theme of my presentation, from branded to branding for sustainable prosperity, Brand Jamaica on the Rise, is born out of the most significant achievements of my ministry this past year, namely the passing of the act shortly titled the National Heroes and Freedom Fighters Absolution from Criminal Liability in respect of specific acts that came into force on March 5 this year. Our ancestors, Mr. Speaker, were forcibly removed from Africa, their homeland, and branded on arrival here in Jamaica. They were branded as property, branded to keep them in a state of absolute servility, and branded to see themselves as less than human. In passing the bill, we, the great-grandchildren, have redressed a great wrong by restoring their dignity and pride, and by acclaiming them to be celebrated freedom fighters. I'm humbled to be the minister who piloted this bill, and we all in this House should be proud that it is this Parliament which completed this long walk to justice for our ancestors. Each and every one of us in this chamber should take credit and be proud of this achievement. I must, however, acknowledge the fact that the President of the Senate, Tom Tavares Finson, initiated this bill, supported by Professor Vereen Shepherd, the Minister Bobby Montague, among others, and to thank the Attorney General for the support that she gave in ensuring that we were ready to take the bill. This must count as one of the proud moments in the story of a people who struggled for survival and mixed with all the races to create our unique, out of many, one people. Our unique vibe, our unique spirit, and our unique culture, heritage, and traditions. Our unique branding that has been monetized to bring revenues to our people and country. A branding that has allowed us to stand as equals on the great human stage of global achievement. A branding for sustainable prosperity. But we are called to go even further, Mr. Speaker. Despite the prominence and success of brand Jamaica, many of our people still see foreign things as better and they value our own creations and our creators. Some only see our worth after foreign gives its stamp of approval. Just recently, we heard cries for justice from members of the entertainment industry. I have met with the practitioners, had discussions with the Minister of Tourism, and we are working towards a resolution. Other members of the creative sector are crying out for justice, Mr. Speaker. They're tired of being undervalued in this country that has, in many cases, provided the investment and the inspiration for what they do. They just want a little respect, Mr. Speaker. I pledge to continue to be the chief advocate, the chief cheerleader, the chief supporter, the chief motivator for our creative and athletic people, and will do all I can to ensure that they get the respect and recognition they deserve. Our creative and athletic people have done so much for this country. Not only do they bring honor and glory to Jamaica, but bring thousands of visitors to Destination Jamaica. They're also responsible for the tremendous and impactful creative economy that has lifted so many of our people from poverty to prosperity. The creative economy is that part of the national economy that includes the cultural and creative industries, entertainment and sport, including the horse racing industry. It includes those sectors in which creativity and innovation play seminal roles in design and other elements of creation. It includes the creation of ringtones for download in the telecommunications sector. And those ringtones should be seen within the telecommunications sector as media arts. It includes hotel entertainment in the tourism sector, as well as the performing and the visual arts. And also the culinary arts, which my colleague Minister of Tourism markets as gastronomy. We're building a new relationship with our statistical agencies, Mr. Speaker, to develop systems, including the establishment of a satellite account to measure and publish the full value of Jamaica's creative economy. In the meantime, we have the results of several studies that have made what I consider to be very conservative estimates of the value of the creative sector. The Planning Institute of Jamaica commissioned business plan for Jamaican cultural and creative industries estimates, Mr. Speaker, that the creative sectors contribute 5.2% to the gross domestic product, generating revenue of between 15 to 20 million US dollars annually, and accounting for 3% of total employment. But this does not take into account employment in other linked sectors, such as hotel entertainers, chefs, and performers in film and television productions, such as Digicel Rising Star. It also does not include seasonal employment in relation to festivals and other events, such as Reggae Month, Carnival in Jamaica, the Jamaica Independence Festival, Rebel Salute, Reggae Sumfest, among others. Another study looked at the value of music alone, Mr. Speaker. The International Fund for Cultural Diversity 2017 report stated that, and I quote, "In Kingston, Jamaica, the music sector, which today is worth an estimated $130 million US, remains the driver of the local economy, employing around 43,000 people in this city of 660,000. That, Mr. Speaker, is real value which has a significant impact on communities and families. In 2016, JAMPO facilitated investments in the cultural and creative industries valued at $329.7 million in film and television projects under the Fiscal Incentives Act. And I hope the Minister of Finance is listening keenly. However, the economic credit was reflected in the accounts of industry and broadcasting. Broadcasting is media arts and not culture. Similarly, the uptake for Carnival in Jamaica and hotel entertainment is reflected in the accounts of tourism, while ringtones and creative products such as Magnum, Kings and Queens of Dancehall, are reflected on the telecommunications and broadcasting. This, Mr. Speaker, presents a distortion of the reality of the contribution of the creative economy to GDP, and we are working to correct that. We want our respect. We will never get the respect of recognition if we do not provide empirical evidence that we are a driving force, contributing significantly to Jamaica's economy. It is our priority to build the creative economy for this simple reason. And I must tell you, the OAS and the IDB and the World Bank, they refer to the creative economy as the orange economy. No. For me, orange is tangerine. Okay. Okay? All right. Now, the UNESCO publication in 2013 says, and I quote, Mr. Speaker, "The creative economy is not only one of the most rapidly growing sectors of the world economy, but also a highly transformative one in terms of income generation, job creation, and export earnings. Many poor Jamaicans have been able to use their creativity to improve their lives, the lives of family members, and even their entire communities. I, Mr. Speaker, along with my team at the ministry, will continue to invest in finding and developing creative and athletic talent. This is how we will create the environment for growth in the creative economy and help many more Jamaicans to rise from
poverty
to prosperity. Mr. Speaker, we have been investing in small business people living in communities close to the Blue and John Crow Mountains World Heritage Site. Our Economic Opportunities Workshop, conducted by the Jamaica Business Development Corporation, have been providing the entrepreneurial training and other types of support to enable them to take advantage of opportunities emanating from the World Heritage designation. More than 400 people in the parishes of Portland, St. Thomas, and St. Andrew have benefited from our workshops and are now set for takeoff. We're happy to have been able to provide grants totaling $1 million Jamaican dollars to 20 small businesses to give them that push. For example, Mr. Speaker, Millicent Henry, operator of the Spring Garden CDC winery in Portland, used the grant to acquire an industrial blender to puree fruits in the production of wines, as well as a gas stove and an industrial fan. Uriel Jackson from Leith Hall District in Port Morant, St. Thomas, operator of Kumina Culture, used his grant to purchase materials for the production of Kumina drums and for marketing initiatives. And Glenmark Bell, artist and operator of Portland Fine Arts, was able to use the grant to purchase raw materials and equipment for his fine arts studio. Mr. Speaker, I could list several others, But these are just examples of how we are creating the right environment for our creative entrepreneurs to succeed. I'm grateful to JSIF, to Hard Trust NTA, and the Jamaica National Group for their support in this initiative. Our focus is to help build out unique cultural merchandise. In the last 2 years, Mr. Speaker, there's been a marked improvement in tangible support to our various cultural and heritage communities, with focus on building out that unique cultural experience. We have increased funding support from $5 million to $11 million. The communities and activities are the Maroon Celebrations in a Compound, January 6th, is a hallmark heritage tourism activity supported by the JTB, and we have given them support. We have also given support to the other Maroon communities, that is Charlestown, Scotts Hall, and Moortown. But we have also given support to Indian Arrival Day commemoration activities, to Indian Jose celebrations, and Rastafari commemorative events such as the commemoration of the Carroll Gardens incident and the visit to Jamaica of His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie I. As we continue to invest in our creative talent, I'm pleased to announce the establishment of the Jamaica Creative 100 program with funding of $26 million. This is to help with the further development of creative people across Jamaica who have imprinted their unique brand in the global marketplace or have the potential to do so. Through this program, we will fund short to medium-term projects to help small business entrepreneurs to create new products for the global marketplace or to enter new markets. These small business entrepreneurs just need a little help, Mr. Speaker, to cut a bigger slice of the global creative pie. Selections will be through an open call based on growth potential, entrepreneurship, and quality. The Jamaica Creative 100 program will be administered by the National Cultural and Creative Industries Council, which is now being operationalized in my ministry. The council will operate as an overarching, intersectoral, one-stop shop for targeted intervention in the creative sector. The NCCI, which is the acronym, among the deliverables are the establishment of a digital distribution and promotion platform for Jamaican music, video, and fashion. The establishment of a Kingston Creative Media Village for increased visibility and accessibility of creative practitioners. The establishment of the Creative Skills Council and Skills Bank, and the establishment of a Culture and Creative Industries Fund for Jamaica. Mr. Speaker, we are embarking on a program of deliberate promotion of the business of culture, the arts, and the creative economy. Recently, we staged the National Conference of Culture Clubs. The aim of the conference was to foster greater awareness of the economic value of creativity, the centrality of the creative economy to the national economy, and the importance of careers in the creative sector. We have to address, Mr. Speaker, the bias in the promotion of careers to young people. It is good and valuable to be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, but it is equally good and valuable to be a creative professional, a songwriter, a singer, a producer, a sports person, a gender activist, or an archaeologist. The entertainment sector has been robust in the past year, Mr. Speaker. The JCF reported that 19,158 events were staged across the island last year. These events provided more than 30,000 temporary jobs. The Kingston and St. Andrew Municipal Corporation is very aware of the value of entertainment, since it collected a whopping $28 million from entertainment licenses. The Kingston and St. Andrew Municipal Corporation issues 33% of all entertainment licensing in Jamaica annually. Between 2013 and 2017, the value of entertainment to the economy was estimated to be 107 billion Jamaican dollars, or 836 million US. As impressive as that is, Mr. Speaker, we know it is an undervaluation since not all entertainment subsectors were accounted for. Over the period 2012 to 2017, 120,264 events were granted permits supporting Jamaica's status as a mecca for festivals. Mr. Speaker, during Reggae Month this past February, more than 70 reggae-related events were held in Kingston alone. Due to this uptick in music events, there was a 7% increase in visitor arrivals over the similar period last year. While the carnival period, Mr. Speaker, saw 45 events being held between November and April, with a 12.5% increase in visitor arrival over the similar period last year. This uptick in visitor arrivals and the subsequent direct and indirect spending in the economy is attributable to both Reggae Month and Carnival in Jamaica. Among the many things we are proud of as the entertainment portfolio supports the rise of Brand Jamaica is the designation of Kingston as the only Caribbean creative city of music. We partnered with UNESCO, Mr. Speaker, in staging a Creative Cities workshop during Reggae Month. 9 cities of music from the following countries joined us in Kingston at this workshop. I name the countries: Japan, South Korea, Sweden, United Kingdom, Portugal, Germany, Poland, and Australia. Earlier this year, my ministry, the Jamaica Music Museum, and the University of the West Indies staged the inaugural Imagine Kingston Conference, focused on research, data gathering, and case studies on the concept of creative cities and the capacity of creativity to spur urban regeneration. UNESCO, Mr. Speaker, has declared the conference as a global best practice, and my ministry, as a focal point for the program, presented the case study at the recently concluded UNESCO Creative Cities Conference in Poland that had participation from 181 countries. Mr. Speaker, as the Jamaican fashion industry rises to new heights of global recognition, and our models take center stage worldwide, the hosting of the various Style Weeks and the staging of unique fusion between Style Week and the Jamaica Business Development Corporation's Designer Incubation Program deserve our commendation and support. Mr. Speaker, we recognize the inadequacy of estate planning and benefit support within the entertainment sector. The families of several entertainers have found themselves in turmoil when many of our entertainers die and during moments of illness. Many of them don't think they will ever die, and so they never plan, and they leave their families in distress. In March this year, we staged an estate planning, pensions, and financing workshop for members of the music industry and other creative sectors. It was done in collaboration, Mr. Speaker, with the Development Bank of Jamaica, the Administrator General's Department, and the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. This was a timely response, Mr. Speaker, to the passing of 18 entertainers between September 2016 and September 2017. We will announce details later this year on the entertainment industry insurance plan, which will be similar to the athletes' insurance scheme. We are working to regularize the entertainment sector, Mr. Speaker, and the following are some of the activities carried out. 223 individuals and 39 companies are now registered on the National Registry of Entertainment and Creative Industry Practitioners. This registry seeks to streamline the incentive process, allow for hassle-free movement across borders, and regularize creative practitioners, given the CARICOM heads of government mandate to develop a registry for service providers across the region. We processed 263 event extension applications for micro and small enterprises in 2017. And Mr. Speaker, I must explain. These extensions that we process, I'm sure you are very much familiar with those extensions. Once the police give the approval for an event and the license are paid to the parish council, my ministry sends in the request to the Jamaica Constabulary Force for extension of time to hold these events. And I must tell Parliament that the acting speaker, the deputy speaker of the House, is one such person who has made use of the extension that is provided for this purpose. You serve your constituency well. This round robin, yes. This generated total direct, indirect, and induced linkages of more than $488 million and temporary employment for 4,528 people. The ministry recognizes the global commercial value of reggae, dancehall, ska, and other Jamaican genres, and the large number of international reggae festivals that pervade the global landscape. Mr. Speaker, we have identified more than 324 international reggae festivals across the world, including Rotterdam Sunsplash in Spain, Reggae Sunska in France, and Ostrada Reggae Festival, one of the oldest in Europe. We note their value as employment for Jamaican artists. During the summer, most of our artists go on tour. These festivals, their contribution to the global appeal of our branding activities and Destination Jamaica and to the national economy is recognized. In this regard, the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport will continue a partnership with these various global festivals for quality assurance and control and to ensure greater coordination in the sale of creative goods and services, as well as the enhancement of these global circuits for the promotion and merchandising of Jamaican music products. We will continue to give tour support to our artists who perform at these events as a promotional tool to build brand Jamaica and Destination Jamaica. Mr. Speaker, I would like to report to this Honourable House on an archaeological find of significant national historic importance at White Marl, St. Catherine, where an archaeological team led by the Jamaica National Heritage Trust unearthed, among other things, 3 whole skeletons, 4 zemis, ceramic earthenware pottery sherds, and tools. The area known as White Marl has long been considered to be one of the most important prehistoric sites in Jamaica. Research indicates that the area was occupied for more than 600 years, between 900 and 1500 AD, that is 600 years after Christ, by the first Jamaicans, the Taínos, who were in the past mistakenly referred to as the Arawaks. Anthropologists and archaeologists now know that the people that met Columbus, Mr. Speaker, in 1492 were not the Arawaks, but were a people who called themselves Taínos, meaning noble or prudent people. This significant find adds to our understanding of and confirms our beliefs about the Taínos. You will see we have artifacts, some of the artifacts that were uncovered being displayed in the lobby. For instance, 2 of the skeletons were found with bowls, food bowls, buried with food bowls. And we think that these bowls were filled with food and buried with the deceased as part of the Taino tradition aimed at sustaining the spirit in the afterlife. The shells found at the site give us an idea of the diet of the Taínos, which include conch, clams, oyster, and land snails. The unusual burial positions are shedding new light on Taíno belief systems and customs and the heritage of Jamaica. The priceless zemis, and I must explain for those who don't know, zemi is a sculpture or carving housing a spirit of the Taino people of the Caribbean. And I'll tell you a little story. On one occasion when they unearthed a Taino carving, as they took it up out of the earth, there was a gush of wind and the rain and a downpour of rain. When they took that zemi back to the trust and did the research, there was a tear from the eye of that zemi. Wow. And from their research, that zemi was considered a rain god. We have a priceless find that we have to protect. The priceless zemis and other treasures found during this excavation belong to the Jamaican people and must be preserved and protected for future generations. Yes. In that regard, we are working to repatriate treasures that belong to Jamaica, which are in foreign countries. Yes, yes. For example, in 1792, 3 Taino zemis were recovered from a cave in Carpenter's Mountain in Manchester by a British surveyor and taken overseas, where they remain in the British Museum until today. We tried to borrow them for an exhibition and was told that they would have to be insured for millions of dollars. As part of the plan, Mr. Speaker, to protect and repatriate, we have begun preparatory work towards Jamaica's ratification of 2 international conventions to deal with the illicit trafficking of cultural heritage. Yes, bring them all. The UNESCO Convention on the Means of Prohibiting and Preventing the Illicit Import, Export, and Transfer of Ownership of Cultural Property, and the UNIDROIT Convention on Stolen or illegally exported cultural objects. Additionally, we will be amending the Jamaica National Heritage Trust Act, as the existing legislation does not address trade in cultural material per se, and all cultural material are not protected under the JNHD Act. And I must tell you, Mr. Speaker, we have had calls from the airport, from immigration and customs, where persons have been caught leaving Jamaica with important artifacts that belong to us. I wish to commend the team of the Jamaica National Heritage Trust, the Leiden University of the Netherlands, and the Department of History and Archaeology at UWI-Mona, who are collaborating on the excavations. I now speak to a subject dear to the heart of my colleague from Central Clarendon. He is very passionate about reparations. In the same way we take action in this House to clear the names of our national heroes and freedom fighters, we must also take action to ensure that reparations are paid for all that our ancestors endured under the evil system of slavery, having been brought to this island in chains and branded like animals. We must pursue reparation. The great wrong must be set right. To those who would say slavery was a long time ago and we should simply move on, I point them to the debilitating impact of slavery even today. More than 300 years of oppression and brutality have left lasting scars, whether in the low self-esteem reflected in our behaviors within our communities, within our population, such as bleaching until we can't enjoy the rays of the Jamaican sun, or high levels of violence and crime. The residues of slavery continue. The National Council on Reparation, which is located in my ministry, is reviewing the evidentiary basis of the demand for reparatory justice or reparatory justice from Britain for native genocide, African enslavement, deceptive Indian indentureship, other colonial injustices, and the continuing legacies of colonialism. At the same time, we are building a strong grassroots movement, including our young people, who we cannot ignore in our determination that reparations must be paid. Mr. Speaker, I take seriously the responsibility given to me by Prime Minister Andrew Holness to carry out the program of reparations and relief to the Rastafari elders who suffered in the Coral Gardens incident of 1963. Since the Prime Minister's apology on behalf of the government of Jamaica last year in Parliament, we have built a positive working relationship with the Rastafari community. We are committed to national support for the 21 elders so far identified by the Office of the Public Defender. My ministry has already transferred a sum of $12 million to the Administrator General as trustee to establish a Rastafari Trust Fund. And Mr. Speaker, we are committed to transfer $30 million annually over the next 3 years to ensure the sustainability of the fund. Coming out of deliberations, I'll be having discussions with the Minister of Education, Youth and Information to create 3 annual scholarships at primary, secondary and tertiary levels to provide benefits to the wider national Rastafari community. I'm also setting up a mechanism to more effectively manage communication with the Rastafari community, similar to the Reparations Secretariat in my ministry. And I must tell you, Mr. Speaker, that I had discussions yesterday with the Minister of National Security, whose constituency the Coral Gardens Benevolent Society reside. And he has made arrangements for land to be provided as well as office space for the Coral Gardens Benevolent Society and the community in his constituency. Jamaica continues, Mr. Speaker, its global leadership in regional and international sport. Today, we commend all our elite sportsmen and women who have been sustaining our global presence. I pay tribute to the many coaches and clubs, such as racers and MVP, as well as to the GC Foster College of Physical Education and Sport, the University of Technology, and the University of the West Indies, which have also been branding Jamaica as a destination for sports training and development, attracting athletes, Mr. Speaker, from over 20 countries to our shores. I applaud the private sector companies and individuals who provide the platform for our elite athletes to be able to fully concentrate on their craft and brand Jamaica as a strong and exciting sports nation. I invite this Honorable House at this time to acclaim the Honorable Usain St. Leopold, the world's most legendary athlete, on his retirement. The government of Jamaica is proud to have installed the Bold statue at the National Stadium on behalf of a grateful nation. It is our hope that this monument will not only serve as a tribute to Usain Bolt, but even more so as an inspiration to our young upcoming athletes. Since mounted, Independence Park has had a record number of visitors to the complex to see and be photographed beside the statue. 2 Saturdays ago, Mr. Speaker, I had the pleasure of presenting the maquette of Shelly Ann's statue to the nation. I reported this House that she's happy with the design, and we are now in the process of scheduling a date for the installation of the life-size statue at Independence Park by the last quarter of this calendar year. The statues of Veronica Campbell-Brown and Asafa Powell are also on track for completion and installation. Those will complete the creation of 4 statues as part of the Jamaica 55 Legacy Program.
Speaker's time has expired, House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I ask that the member's time be extended by 15 minutes to enable her to complete her presentation.
Half an hour.
Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Ms. Grange.
Half an hour, and no rush.
No. But I do that too. Right. Mr. Speaker, in the field of football, I am pleased that we were able to come to an amicable resolution that saw Theodore Tapper Whitmore reinstated as the national coach of the Reggae Boys. We congratulate the boys on their rise to the top 50 in the world ratings and their exceptional performance in last year's CONCACAF Gold Cup, where they finished second. We continue to work closely with the JFF on the development of the national program. Mr. Speaker, I also highlight the following successes. The Sunshine Girls finished second in the Fast 5 World Netball Series that featured the top nations in the sport. At the Commonwealth Games in April 2018, Team Jamaica won 27 medals, the most we have ever won. Of commendation was our outstanding performance in the field events and the middle distance and long distance races at that event. In rugby, 5 teams qualified to participate in regional and international competitions, including the Commonwealth Games and Rugby Sevens, both for the first time. Yes. In chess, Jamaica hosted the sub-zonal tournament, a world championship qualifying event. And for the first time, our own Shane Matthews won to become only the second Jamaican international master in chess. And during the year, 15-year-old Joshua Christie won the CAC Youth Championship in Panama and became the youngest FIDE master in Jamaica's history. During the year, Jasmine Finlater Victorian, Kerry Russell, and Audra Sigree became the first Jamaican woman to qualify for and represent our nation in the bobsled competition at the Winter Olympics. Mr. Speaker, I now speak of anti-doping. I wish to highlight that 2 doping control officers from the Jamaica Anti-Doping Commission were selected by the organizing committee to participate in the 2018 Winter Olympics under the International Doping Control Program. JADCO also entered into a contract with the Canadian Centre for Ethics in Sport in March of this year to provide doping control services and vice versa. Those activities were undertaken as part of our program to strengthen the National Anti-Doping in Sport program. Additionally, we continue to perform routine tests with more than 500 conducted over the past year. Mr. Speaker, Jamaica is firmly against doping in sports and will intensify our anti-doping education program for athletes and their support teams. I introduce this next section with one powerful image that signals outstanding prowess and the need to nurture and manage the transition of young athletes to elite status. At the recently concluded Jamaica International Invitational, we watched in awe, Mr. Speaker, as one of our outstanding junior athletes branded Jamaica again as legendary when he outshone such international senior stars as Onaso Jobadwana of South Africa and LaShawn Merritt of the United States of America at 200 meters. Mr. Speaker, I speak of this outstanding Christopher Taylor.
Yes, yes.
He outshone everyone at the National Junior and Senior Championships recently to easily win the 400 meters, running in the seniors race to set a new national junior record and a new personal best. And over the weekend, he equaled the national junior 100 meters record at the National Stadium in the Under-18 International Invitational meet. Mr. Speaker, Christopher Taylor is one of a kind.
Yes.
One of a kind. So many of our junior athletes continue to shine. We commend their outstanding performance in the recent Carifta Games, where Brianna Williams won the Austin Seeley Award for being the most impressive athlete of the championships. In swimming, Jamaica topped the point standing among the girls for the first time in a long time, with the combined boys and girls team placing third overall. And we cannot overlook our continued success at the Penn Relays and outstanding performances in other sports, such as badminton and table tennis.
Yes, well.
We must commend the performances in the annual Boys and Girls Championship, which has sustained its branding as the most outstanding global event at that level in organization and performance. Commendations to ISA as well. Mr. Speaker, our children should take part in and develop a love of sport and physical activity, but in circumstances that guarantee their safety, protection, and overall well-being. One of the priorities this year is to finalize a policy and regulatory framework for safeguarding our children in sport. We must ensure that children in sport are not harmed in any way, are able to enjoy sport and make participation in sporting activity a way of life, and are in the care of fit and proper people, not being exposed to any form of abuse. I've established a task force geared at facilitating the coordination of existing and planned initiatives, adopting best practices, and developing mechanisms for monitoring and evaluating policies relative to the safeguarding and protection of children in sport. So, Speaker, we are working to sustain the high levels of performance with Jamaican sport by retrofitting and improving the infrastructure to create the right environment for training and development. 128 million, or I should say, a little over 128 million, has been allocated to the Sport Development Foundation for the purpose of upgrading our facilities. The works will see improvement to the National Stadium, the layout of synthetic basketball courts at stadium courts, and upgrading of fields across the country. And it includes some of the facilities that members of Parliament have approached me in assisting in the development of those facilities. Time does not permit for me to name them. In addition, we will continue to fund the granting of access to the national sports facilities, to our national teams, including netball, basketball, aquatics, track and field, gymnastics, badminton, taekwondo, volleyball, table tennis, and rugby. An amount of $48 million has been allocated to Independence Park Limited to fund access to the facilities by national teams. This year, the 44 national sports associations and federations will benefit from a subvention of $189 million in total. The planned development of the national sport infrastructure will also assist in our efforts to establish Jamaica as a destination for international sport. Mr. Speaker, last year we hosted several international events: Racers Grand Prix, Jamaica International Invitational Meet, International Professional Boxing, the inaugural Jamaica Classic College Basketball Tournament, which has a large following in the United States. We will be hosting the Jamaica Classic again this year at the Montego Bay Convention Center, November 16 to 18. All the games, Mr. Speaker, will be broadcast live on CBS Sports Network. There will be more than 44 million people across the United States viewing these games. And this is being done in collaboration with the Jamaica Tourist Board. Mr. Speaker, this year we will have an increase in the number of teams that participated last year. More room nights for hoteliers in the city. Last year, there were 1,000 room nights booked just by the organizers, not to mention the visitors who came as fans. As an added treat, we'll welcome home the great Patrick Ewing, the Jamaican Basketball Hall of Fame personality, who is currently the head coach for Georgetown University, which will participate in the Jamaican Classic for the first time. Patrick Ewing has been an inspiration and role model for so many of our local basketball players, and we look forward to welcoming him home in November. Recently, I met with the new Director General of UNESCO, and we are currently in discussion with the organization as well as other international bodies to identify sporting opportunities for Jamaica. I shared with the Director General my vision to see Jamaica lead the charge in creating a mechanism for regional cooperation focused on enhancing the contribution of sport to sustainable development in the Caribbean and sports for peace. This includes collating and producing research and evidence on these contributions. Mr. Speaker, we are reaping the benefits of our sport diplomacy. Through bilateral cooperation, we aim to enhance the capacity of the national sport infrastructure, talent, and administration. I now report on the Jamaica-China Technical Coaching Project based on agreements between our two countries. In January of this year, we welcomed to Jamaica a 9-member team from the People's Republic of China, including 7 coaches for the following disciplines: women's football, women's volleyball, women's basketball, badminton, gymnastics, swimming, and synchronized swimming. The team observed and worked with local association and stage coaching clinics at the G.C. Foster College. Mr. Speaker, we are now in the second phase of the project, where a delegation of approximately 140 Jamaicans, comprising athletes, coaches, managers, and administrators, will travel to China this month for a period of 60 days for specialized training and competition. The first batch left the island last Saturday. And in addition, we will receive a donation of equipment in all the sporting disciplines from China. The program cost the government of China an estimated $8.5 million US, and the cost to the government of Jamaica is about $300,000 US. I'm sure the House will join me in expressing our gratitude to the government of the People's Republic of China. Mr. Speaker, I wish to report on efforts to reform the Institute of Sports in sports as part of the strengthening of our sports governance structure. Upon my return to government in 2016, I received a draft of the Auditor General's special audit on the Institute of Sports, which was later tabled in this House. The special audit showed an organization that was continually breaking the law, badly managed, and in need of urgent transformation. We have taken corrective action, and I can say that InSports is now building a culture of a well-run, accountable organization that gives value to the people of Jamaica. The new InSports management team has reported that the agency is now adhering to government regulations, guidelines, and procedures. All outstanding statutory deductions and other staff deductions have been paid up. Yes. And of the controversial $80 million in arrears owed to the pension fund, the sum of $40 million have now been paid over to the pension fund administrator, and they are working to settle the matters. Well done. However, Mr. Speaker, some issues uncovered at the Institute of Sports require further investigation. And I will repeat. Some issues uncovered at the Institute of Sports require further investigation. I now inform this Honorable House that the major organized crime and anti-corruption agency, MOCA, is conducting an investigation into irregularities uncovered at the agency. Therefore, I am unable to give any further details. Mr. Speaker, I wish to quickly give an update on the establishment of the National Sports Museum. We have been doing preparatory work for the establishment of the museum in both virtual and physical spaces. We have completed a strategic business plan assisted by the Canadian Sport Museum and Hall of Fame. In the meantime, we have developed content for the museum, including audiovisual features on some of our standing sports personalities, including George, Leslie Bonnie Grant, Lindy Della Pena, and Stephanie Taylor. We have conducted a textile conservation and preservation training workshop to ensure that the skill set is in place to handle the requirements of the museum, particularly in the preservation and management of artifacts. Just.
House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, we ask that the member be given 5 minutes to complete her presentation.
Those in favor? Aye. Those against? Ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, we have intensified, thank you, Mr. Speaker, our procuring and soliciting of memorabilia for the museum, and will be launching a collection drive later this year. We will also be digitizing the artifacts towards creating a virtual museum in the short term while we build out the physical structure. Mr. Speaker, I now want to move to gender. I now turn to gender issues which are not about just women. Gender issues are about men and women, yes, boys and girls, and how we will live as equals in harmony to build our country. And I want to speak directly to men, Mr. Speaker, including those in this honorable House, because we need to engage our men in solving some of our most pressing gender issues. Just recently, UN Women, the Inter-American Development Bank, and Statistical Institute of Jamaica collaborated with my ministry to publish the findings of the Women's Health Survey. The survey was really about collecting information on the nature and prevalence of gender-based violence in Jamaica. And what did the data show? That 1 in every 4 women in Jamaica has experienced physical violence by a male partner. The acts of violence include slapping, we call it Jamaica box down the woman, beating with fists, which we mean them the man thumper, pushing, which means the man choke her, and attacking with a weapon, sometimes a gun.
What about the woman with thumb down the man?
That a quarter of women had been sexually abused, Mr. Speaker, by men who are not their intimate partners. That the majority of these perpetrators were known to the women. They were friends or acquaintances.
Shameful.
That 1 out of every 5 women reported being sexually abused before reaching 18 years old.
Tragic.
The main perpetrators were family and friends.
What about the women who beat men?
While the majority of victims... You're taking up my time.
Leave Natalie alone.
While the majority of...
Natalie alone.
I'm going to need extra time, Mr. Speaker. While the majority of victims of domestic abuse may not make a report to the authorities, they do talk about their experience. 8 out of every 10 victims say they share their experience with friends, families, and neighbors. But too many of us, Mr. Speaker, including men in positions of influence, do nothing. The National Strategic Action Plan to eliminate gender-based violence has a series of actions to prevent violence, protect and deliver adequate services to victims, and to deal with perpetrators appropriately. Today, I call on men across Jamaica to take a leadership role in ending gender-based violence. Men have a unique power to influence their brother, their friend, their colleague, their brethren, their son, to change violent behaviors and protect women and girls everywhere. Mr. Speaker, I urge every man and woman with influence in this House and across the nation to take a stand. Do something about the domestic violence that you know goes on next door, or do your part to remove every woman and every man from abusive situations. Mr. Speaker, I quickly touch on a very sensitive topic: sexual harassment. 1 in every 4 women report that she has been sexually harassed during her lifetime. This underscores the importance of the anti-sexual harassment legislation that I'm determined to have passed by this House. The victims of harassment, men and women, have been waiting for this bill, and they expect us to get it right. The Ministry of Justice originally had carriage of the anti-sexual harassment bill. Sometime after the change of administration, the bill came to my ministry. We examined it as against the drafting instructions and discovered that one of the drafting instructions, a hostile working environment, was not present among the proposals. For that reason, the bill was returned to the Office of the Chief Parliamentary Counsel along with the drafting instructions. It was thereafter sent back to my ministry. We had to begin a consultative process with the ministries that were designated special responsibilities under the bill, especially the Ministry of Labour and Social Security. We received extensive constructive critique of the bill from our sister ministry, which helped us to reformulate and revise certain provisions. We dealt with the challenges that were involved. And today, I am happy to report to this House that the Cabinet has passed the policy and the proposed bill, which I will lay on the table of the House. I anticipate a robust debate on both sides of this House as we together send a strong message that sexual harassment has no place, anywhere, anytime in our country. Mr. Speaker, 1 out of every 2 women who has been abused by her intimate partner never leave home. The reasons are varied and complex, but many women simply do not have a safe place to go. For this reason, we included the establishment of national shelters as part of the Jamaica 55 Legacy Program. And I'm pleased to report today that Cabinet has approved the purchase of a property for use as a national shelter in rural Jamaica. Yes. We have completed the purchase and will have the shelter operational very soon. Mr. Speaker, I have the keys.
Yes.
It's rare.
We have the keys.
I have the keys. I'm also pleased to report that the crisis shelter owned by the government and operated by Women Inc. was refurbished, retrofitted, and reopened through partnership with USAID on the International Day of the Girl Child in October last year. Mr. Speaker, as I close, I want to highlight Yashika Brooks, one of the many adolescent mothers who have not been left behind. She took the advantage of the services offered at the Women's Center and is now set to advance herself through a nursing career. Yes. She was only 14 when she began pregnant. She was forced to leave school, suffered isolation, discrimination, emotional turmoil, and abuse from her community, friends, and family. But she was determined to excel, believing that her life should not end with pregnancy. And as she progressed in high school, advanced to sixth form, she was able to get assistance. 2 minutes. She was able to get assistance.
How much time more you need so that the leader of government business can afford you some extra
Mr.
time?
Mr. Speaker, I'm closing.
Minister. Eh? Mr. Samuda.
Mr. Speaker, we have introduced a program to assist these young girls who cannot stay in school. It's called the A-Stream program. And it is now seen as a best practice program. Mr. Speaker, as I close, I commit to you, #Mission 2018, from branded to branding for sustainable prosperity, brand Jamaica on the rise. And in so doing, I seek the support and involvement of all Jamaica. I lead, Mr. Speaker, by example. I'm available to all my stakeholders, and in the words of Queen Africa, you can call me by my name. I'm ready to roll. Call me anytime. This lioness, like brand Jamaica, is on the rise. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.
Yes. Her name is not Natalie.
No, Marlene.
Please leave Natalie alone.
Mr. Speaker,
Leave Natalie alone.
it is clear that there has been. It is clear that there has been a scheduling problem.
Stay with you,
what
man.
we really need to do.
Thank you. Lisa,
when the minister wants to speak in this honorable house in the sectoral debate, is set a date for her to speak, to be the single speaker. Because I know she could go on for another hour, and we would all enjoy it. But I now invite you to ask the member from West Central St. James and the Attorney General to make her presentation.
Attorney General. Go ahead.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very grateful for another opportunity to address this honorable House in the sectoral debates, though honestly I would prefer if it were earlier in the day. I want to upfront say thank you to members on both sides who have remained in the House at this time. Mr. Speaker, there is a printed presentation. It is not my intention to go through the presentation verbatim from start to finish, but it contains very important information regarding the work of the chambers, and I invite all persons to read. Mr. Speaker, I give thanks firstly to the Almighty who has begun this work in me. I believe with all my heart that He's faithful to complete it. God has blessed me with a supportive and loving family, for which I'm eternally grateful. In particular, I thank my husband for his continued good guidance. Mr. Speaker, I also want to thank my St. James West Central constituency team. I do not take for granted the votes of confidence that have brought me here. Representing my constituents ably remains my primary focus and top priority. I must say that it has been a humbling and eye-opening experience, understanding what comes with the role of elected representative. Mr. Speaker, I want to put on record my thanks to the hard-working team at the Attorney General's chambers, many of whom are here. Some are coming to the House for the very first time. I also want to thank my secretary, my personal assistant, and the close protection officers who provide tremendous support. This is the third year in a row that the privilege has been extended to me to speak in these debates. On the first occasion in 2016, I explained that although the Attorney General attends the Cabinet and the Solicitor General attends the Permanent Secretary's Board, the Office of Attorney General is not a ministerial office. In fact, Mr. Speaker, the Office of Attorney General now occupies an uncustomary place. It appears that further consideration needs to be given to the proper place that the office ought to occupy. Since independence in 1962, the position was always twinned with the ministerial post of either justice or legal affairs. Right now, some confusion surrounds its status, particularly vis-à-vis a minister. It is quite clear, Mr. Speaker, that there is still not a thorough enough understanding of what the Attorney General does and how the office fits into the legislative and executive branches of government. The variety of different responsibilities call for further clarity. In addition to the constitutional role of principal legal advisor, within the British Commonwealth, the Attorney General also has cross-cutting responsibility across all of government for the rule of law. In practice, this is usually tied up with the role of law minister, though the responsibility inheres in the Attorney General role itself. Mr. Speaker, taking instructions from and advising the ministries, departments, agencies, and other public bodies given me a unique insight into the operations of the machinery of government, which allows for a better understanding of what works and what does not work. The Attorney General is also head of the bar. In this regard, there are very specific responsibilities for the proper regulation of the legal profession in the island and for the delivery of legal education across the Caribbean community. To enable the proper discharge of the many functions of the trilateral role of the Attorney General, there should be no confusion about the status of the office. In my discussions with the Prime Minister, I'm pleased to note that he shares the view that at a bare minimum, the Attorney General ought explicitly be an ex officio member of the Cabinet. As such, with the concurrence of the Prime Minister, steps will be taken to make the required amendment to the specific constitutional provision. Mr. Speaker, the Holness administration inherited a policy decision to centralize legal services under the Office of the Attorney General. gearing at achieving, among other things, increased efficiencies and higher quality legal advice and service throughout government. Implementation of the decision remains a focal point in the chambers at this time. We have been assisted in the process by the Canadian government, and we are now at the transition stage where their involvement has come to an end. When I last spoke in these debates in April 2017, I indicated that the new organizational structure for the implementation of centralization of legal services would require the appointment of 3 additional Deputy Solicitors General to head specialist divisions. I can advise that as of January 2018, the 3 new positions have been filled in the interim with acting appointments from internal candidates. The recruitment process has been completed for the 6 new legal positions granted to the litigation division, as well as for the other new positions granted to the chambers, including additional secretaries and a new driver. Mr. Speaker, recruitment is in progress for the position of Director of Human Resource Management and Development. We again thank the Department of Justice Canada for its support of the transformation work of the chambers and the centralization of legal services and other programs of the Government of Jamaica over the past 3 to 4 years under the Justice Undertakings for Social Transformation, JUST Programs, Technical Legal Assistance component. The assistance ended in January 2018. On April 25, 2018, the Minister of Justice formally handed over to the head of the transition team the various documents prepared by the consultants under the JUST program. When I spoke last year, I had also indicated that we were about to commence recruitment for the transition team for implementation of centralization of legal services. In spite of delays in the process, I'm very pleased to report that the head of the transformation team was successfully recruited. Ms. Kayla Sewell Mills commenced her duties at the chambers on April 16, 2018. As part of her duties, in conjunction with the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, she has now recruited other team members, including persons to fill the positions of Project Manager ICT and Transition Team Administrators.
Could you hold a minute? We have to give you some extension of time to Mr. Semuda. The question is that the time is 7:20. The House be allowed to sit beyond 7:30 to complete the business of the day. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Attorney General.
Grateful, Mr. Speaker. Recruitment for the consultants on the transition team who will handle the portfolios of human resources and legal affairs is far advanced. The team is now being funded by a mix of Government of Jamaica and World Bank funds, and the centralization program is taking place under the watchful eye of the Ministry of Justice and the Public Service, as well as the Public Sector Transformation Implementation Unit. As we proceed with the implementation of centralization, intensive training of staff at headquarters and of attorneys within the legal service units will begin this month of July 2018 and continue throughout the implementation phases. We are working to finalize protocols to guide, among other things, decisions on the nature of matters which are to be referred to the chambers, the work to be done by legal officers in the legal service units prior to referral, and the types of matters which may be handled within the legal service units. The staff engagement session, 2 staff engagement sessions have been held since the head of the transition team assumed her position. A 3rd session is planned for July 12, involving all attorneys across ministry legal service units, as well as those within the chambers. This session will form part of a program of visit consisting of a week of activities scheduled to take place over the period July 9 to 14, involving a Canadian consultant who will be in the island to support members of the transition team in the implementation work. Mr. Speaker, exciting days are ahead. We at the chambers are confident that at the end of the process, we will experience a significant improvement in ICT, human resources, as well as organizational systems, and we will be able to provide improved and more timely advice to the government. Mr. Speaker, in my last sectoral presentation, I also spoke of the planned renovation of additional space at the NCB Towers. On April 25, we officially opened the refurbished first floor west wing, which now accommodates the commercial and general legal advice divisions, the commercial task force, the human resource division, the ancillary staff, the administrator, and the head of the transition team, as well as other members of the team. We also have an additional conference room, caucus rooms, sick bay, and lunchroom. With the additional space, we're in a position to also accommodate our increased staff complement. Mr. Speaker, as promised from my last presentation, the website of the chambers was launched on June 1, 2017, www.agc.gov.jm. We wait expectantly for the handover of our new file manager system, which is now in its final stages of development. This will enable us to more quickly provide statistics and respond to various requests for information, as well as manage our work more effectively. Mr. Speaker, in light of the increased positions, including that of a new driver, we have acquired an additional vehicle, and some may not understand the significance of this. But it is very important because it will improve our registry's capacity to distribute mail, serve court documents, and support other administrative needs. We continue to take steps to enhance the facilities available to staff as we carry out the work of the department in support of the government of Jamaica. And Mr. Speaker, I must say that it is really unacceptable to see the poor conditions in which many of our public servants work across government. It is just not right. Their workload is heavy, much is demanded of them, and the facilities really are not up to scratch. Mr. Speaker, at the chambers, we have been slowly but surely improving the conditions in which we operate and the resources that are at our disposal to better serve our clients. New computers have been provided to the staff, and very importantly, an accident manual which seeks to guide the members of the chambers as well as other government agencies in the handling of accident files was completed in August 2017, and I really commend the staff members who did the work on this. Mr. Speaker, in the area of staff development, we continue to hold various training seminars in the course of the year. and we will continue. In July of last year, leadership training continued at the executive level with the assistance of the Management Institute for National Development, the MIND. Executive level staff were also benefiting from professional coaching, having undergone a 360-degree assessment. As we seek to empower, train, and build the team spirit within the chambers, leadership training and team building for staff at all other levels is also set to commence this very month of July. Mr. Speaker, I have to put on record the recurring challenges that we face, and in particular, one of the most critical of those recurring challenges, and that is the lack of timely provision of instructions by our client, ministries, departments, and agencies. When the instructions do not come in a timely way, in the request for advice, we're hindered in our efforts to do the work that we are constitutionally provisioned to do. In particular, the late provision of instructions hinder our efforts to file defenses within the time specified by the civil procedure rules, and it prevents us from defending unjustifiable claims. We want to urge ministries, departments, and agencies, and I know the ministers who remain are listening very carefully, and they are the converted. But I want to ask them to convey to their staff the critical importance of ensuring that instructions come to the chamber in a timely way so that we can do our part in representing and advising them, and also to provide the advice in a timely way. Mr. Speaker, the chambers is also seriously impaired by the insufficiency of staff in light of the workload. And people don't understand, but we're currently working with over 20,000 active files at the Attorney General's chambers. We now have a staff complement of 95 members, with 50 attorneys and 45 members of the administrative and support staff. And this is an increase from where we stood in 2015, when there were only 79 members. Notwithstanding the increase, the level of resources is still way below what is required to handle the workload in a timely manner. And I know that my colleagues understand very clearly that unless the chambers clears the work of government, matters can come to a standstill. So I believe there is a sufficient appreciation of the call for better equipping of the chambers to ensure that the work of government can be done more timely. It is my hope, Mr. Speaker, that the transition team will complete its assessment of the needs of the chambers and recommend to Cabinet an appropriate organizational structure, as well as the requisite staffing to put us in a position to provide timely advice and competent representation. Mr. Speaker, although as Attorney General, I personally write opinions and I go to court in cases of exceptional importance, especially at the highest level, in reality, the advice of the Attorney General is prepared by legal officers who are civil servants in the chambers, and the chambers is one of the largest law firms in Jamaica. I so often tell people that the work of government, using the example of the chambers, is done not only by the political directorate, but that the lion's share is really done by civil and political public servants. And from time to time, I remind my cabinet colleagues that when each minister turns up with only his or her work at cabinet, the Attorney General has everybody's work, because we work right across government. In my two previous presentations, Mr. Speaker, I pointed out that the Chamber's functions primarily through divisions, which undertake all the civil matters for the government ministries, departments, agencies, and other related entities. And it is known that the criminal cases are handled by the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. The volume of work that we are hit with far exceeds the human and other resources available to us. I think I have made the point before, and I reiterate it because it is important that it be understood. And just to give you an idea of how busy we are at the chambers, we have an estimated 50 weekly court appearances, and on average, 5 new court cases every single day. Not to mention requests for advice, cabinet submissions, bills and acts of parliament to review, among other things. Mr. Speaker, it has long been said that the needs of the justice sector have been neglected over the years because the sector was never viewed as a vote-winning one. But I'm happy to be part of an administration, this Andrew Holness administration, that says otherwise. Over the past 2 years, the Chambers has been provided with far-reaching improved resources, including additional and upgraded posts. And I'm told the wait had been over 20 years. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, this administration now has as its #1 medium-term strategic priority of government for fiscal year 2018-19, rule of law and timely justice outcomes. When Minister Grange spoke not so long ago, and she mentioned issues of abuse, she made the call for justice. Well, time for justice has come. I want to now turn my attention to highlights of the work of each division. Mr. Speaker, the Constitutional and Legislative Affairs Division provides legal advice throughout the stages of development of all the laws that we pass in this Parliament. And over the reporting term, I want to single out the Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures Act, and the Constitution Amendment, Established Funds, Payment of Pensions Act, and the Pensions Public Service Act. All three are landmark reform measures. The team at the Constitutional and Legislative Affairs Division did very special work on these bills. As you know, the ZOSO law institutionalizes a legal framework for a joint force drawn from the JDF and the JCF, as well as it provides for compulsory social intervention programs alongside security operations in defined zones. Mr. Speaker, the pension laws allow for the establishment of a defined benefit contributory scheme, the establishment of a segregated fund, gradually increasing the retirement age to 65 years, and harmonizing and consolidating legislation governing public sector pension. I want to put on record my special commendation of this small team, the Legal and Constitutional Affairs Division, headed by Deputy Solicitor General Marlene Aldred, who is here and whom we see week after week. Mr. Speaker, the Deputy Solicitor General and her team work very closely with me on cabinet and parliamentary matters. The finished products that come to this Honourable House are made possible by this team's work. We also have the International Affairs Division. And this division advises the government on all matters involving public and private international law. The work covers a wide range of matters, including international trade and investment, CARICOM, and CARICOM is of particular importance at this time, since tomorrow the Conference of Heads of Government convenes in Montego Bay. The team deals with the environment, international security, a matter of particular importance for us. And included in the international security are areas of mutual legal assistance, drug trafficking, arms trafficking, human trafficking, anti-corruption, counter-terrorism measures, human rights, air law and policy, law of the sea, and maritime delimitation. Mr. Speaker, I don't think many, including in this House, truly understand the work of the chambers and how much we do to ensure that the work of the government of Jamaica gets done and that the people are served. For those who have been there, they do appreciate it. But believe me, I hear it time and time again. You know, the chambers appears sometimes dormant, but there is so much that we do. The division also represents in negotiation and drafting of treaties and other international agreements and protocols, and provide advice on Jamaica's obligations under these instruments. Mr. Speaker, the Attorney General or her representative sits on the Interministerial Committee on Human Rights, which coordinates Jamaica's reporting obligations under the UN Human Rights Treaty bodies through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. The Chambers works closely with the Ministry of Justice in advising on the establishment of the National Human Rights Institute in accordance with the Paris Principle. The International Affairs Division continues to provide support to the National Task Force Against Trafficking in Person, very sensitive matter, and assisted in preparing our report to the State Department of the United States for its annual Trafficking in Persons report. Jamaica is a party to the Inter-American Convention Against Corruption, and we signed on to the mechanism for the follow-up on the implementation of the said convention. The follow-up mechanism, fifth round of review for Jamaica, commenced in 2017. That was last year. And under that fifth round of review, the committee considered Jamaica's implementation of Article 3, paragraphs 3 and 12 of the Convention, which refer respectively to instructions to government personnel to ensure proper understanding of their responsibilities and the ethical rules governing their activities, and to the study of further preventive measures that take into account the relationship between equitable compensation and probity in public service. The Jamaica Constabulary Force and the Office of the Services Commissions were selected by the Attorney General's chambers for review under the fifth round. The committee also reviewed new developments in Jamaica with respect to the convention provisions selected for the second round. The following convention provisions were selected: systems of government hiring and procurement of goods and services, and only today the House dealt with matters relating to the procurement law. Systems of protecting public servants and private citizens who in good faith report acts of corruption. And, Mr. Speaker, acts of corruption under Article 6(1) of the Convention. This year, the Chambers considered requests for assistance from Trinidad and Tobago and Belgium in respect of mutual legal assistance. In considering the request from Belgium, we made a certain recommendation to the Minister of Justice, which resulted in the mutual assistance, criminal matters, foreign states, Kingdom of Belgium Order 2018, which was affirmed in this Honourable House on June 8, 2018. We continue to assist other government agencies such as the Jamaica Customs Agency, to negotiate agreements with partners such as the United States, the Netherlands, the Caribbean Custom and Law Enforcement Council. Through the work of the International Affairs Division, the Chambers was also able to approve the sharing of assets in a number of requests from the United Kingdom and the United States of America. Mr. Speaker, a substantial amount of the work of the International Affairs Division involves CARICOM. The division participates in the senior officials of the Legal Affairs Committee and provides support to the Attorney General, who sits in the Legal Affairs Committee of CARICOM. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, Jamaica currently holds the chair of that committee. Division is also involved in the review of trade-related legislation as part of the broader exercise on trade facilitation. I turn to the Commercial Affairs Division, and our Deputy Solicitor General, who heads the division, is also here, Ms. Melanie. Some of the matters handled by the division are listed in the presentation, and you would see that the work goes right across government, dealing with all of the major investment projects. We looked at the draft concession agreement for the planned modernization and expansion of the Norman Manley International Airport, the draft heads of agreement between the government of Jamaica, acting through the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, and CCA Jamaica Development Group Limited, and the Urban Development Corporation. We also looked at breach of contract for the supply and delivery of the pre-owned motor vehicles to the Jamaica Constabulary Force, the loan contract for the implementation of the National Identification System for Economic Growth between Jamaica and the Inter-American Development Bank. We looked at the Factories Corporation of Jamaica joint venture agreement for the development of the Nagohead Technology Park in Portmore and the Morant Bay Urban Center in St. Thomas, the draft natural gas agreement, the joint venture agreement, Ministry of Housing, Agency of Jamaica, and Pavement and Structures Limited. We did work with the divestment of Wallingford Coffee Company, sale of the Government of Jamaica shares. We also are involved in the Urban Development Corporation projects, commercial development of the Kingston Waterfront and the Port Royal Development Company, and also the Refinery Upgrade Task Force, which took center stage in the discussion earlier in the sitting. Mr. Speaker, the other division that I want to the work of the other division that I want to highlight is a litigation division. And I crave members' attention. I know it is late in the day, but there are some important landmark cases that I am obliged to bring to the House's attention as part of the report of the work of the chambers. So the litigation continued to have a busy year, and I indicated earlier that there is an estimated 50 court appearances per week on average. And Mr. Speaker, I want to put on record my personal commendation to the Deputy Solicitor General and Director of State Proceedings, Ms. Althea Jarrett, who heads the division. Since my appointment as Attorney General, Ms. Jarrett has appeared with me as my junior in 3 cases before the Judicial Committee of Her Majesty's Privy Council, in which we successfully represented the government of Jamaica. 3 out of 3. Among the significant matters handled over the period are Gore Stew versus Her Honor Miss Lorna Shelley Williams, Patrick Lynch, Jeffrey Payne, and Catherine Barber. I mention this case, Mr. Speaker, because it was a case of judicial review of the parish judge's decision to acquit the defendants on fraud charges. The matter proceeded through many stages. When it got to the Privy Council upheld the judgment of the Court of Appeal by refusing the claimant permission to appeal. And the judgment confirmed the principle that in Jamaica, as of now, the prosecution does not have a right of appeal. Minister Chuck has indicated that we are moving to reform that area of the law. But more importantly, this case, there was an attempt to seek judicial review of acquittals, and that had the effect of appealing acquittals through the back door, which the court made it very clear was not allowed. The decision confirmed the time-honored principle that an individual must not be placed in jeopardy of conviction on the same matter twice, often said to be the rule against double jeopardy. And so the attempt at judicial review of an acquittal was not allowed. I know many creative things happen across the courts, but this one made it very clear that such a course of action is not to be entertained. So until the law is changed to provide the right of appeal to the Crown, you can't attempt to appeal through judicial review. Mr. Speaker, I want to highlight another case, the case of Mervyn Cameron against the Attorney General. The claimant is a co-accused in a murder matter which is currently the subject of preliminary inquiry in the Gun Court Division of the Criminal Division of the Parish Court for Kingston and St. Andrew. He was charged with murder of 2 persons whose decomposing bodies were found on September 16 in cane fields in Innswood. The claimant was allegedly arrested in March 2013. He sought constitutional redress in the full court on the basis that he had been denied bail and had been detained for an unreasonably long period on a charge which is supported by circumstantial evidence only. On October 19 last year, the full court found that the claimant's constitutional right to be tried within a reasonable time under Section 14, subsection 3 of the Constitution had been violated, and the court made an order for damages to be assessed. We really can't afford these kinds of claims, but it is what it is, and it is a signal to the government, signal to that area of the justice sector that we have to deal with matters expeditiously. This was a matter of Mervyn Cameron against the Attorney General of Jamaica. Mr. Speaker, I have listed in the report the case of Dennis Meadows against the Jamaica Public Service Company and the Attorney General. This is one of the Privy Council matters in which I appeared for the government, and it involved the action of the former minister, who is a member from Kingston Eastern and Port Royal. So the appeal was heard in the Privy Council in July of last year. It concerned the interpretation of the Electric Lighting Act of 1890, now repealed, and it raised the question of whether the minister had the authority under the Electric Lighting Act to grant to the Jamaica Public Service Company Limited an all-island exclusive license. That was a license granted in April 2001. The board had 2 issues for determination, and they are set out there. But suffice it to say, we fought a fight. You know, Mr. Speaker, this matter is quite interesting because I think the contest arose in the cut and thrust between government and opposition, and how ministerial power is exercised. And when you get into the position of Attorney General, you see only the government of Jamaica, regardless of how the government of Jamaica is made up. You don't have the luxury of looking to see which party formed the administration. You have to look clinically at the legal issues. And having looked clinically on the legal issues, we were able to defend the action of the former minister. And the appeal was dismissed, and the decision of the Court of Appeal upheld. I know the leader of opposition business is smiling because it was a big challenge. let me tell you though, as I mentioned to the leader, that there are some concerns, and it's only through exposure that we learn the lessons, because we can't go down that road again. We can't go down that road again, and we will have to look at the license at some point. The other matter that is mentioned, which I want to highlight, was the Jamaica Public Service Company Limited against the All Island Electricity Appeal Tribunal and the Attorney General. And the case was heard in June of last year in the Privy Council. And colleagues, the appeal centered on the interpretation of the Z-factor clause in the said license. And the issue was whether the payroll costs associated with a job of reclassification and salary restructuring exercise conducted by the JPS could have been included in its rate review application made in March 2004 to the OUR. Mr. Speaker, let me just say that had the matter gone the other way, consumers would have been slapped with a hike in their electricity bill. So I'm pleased to report that we succeeded. We succeeded, and justice was done in the case. I wish to highlight another matter that is very, very important in our jurisprudence. Another Privy Council matter of the University of Technology against the IDT, the Industrial Disputes Tribunal. The decision was handed down by Lady Hale, and she contrasted the statutory role of the IDT under our Labour Relations and Industrial Disputes Act with the provisions of the United Kingdom's Employment Rights Act 1996 relating to unfair dismissals. Lady Hale highlighted the following points about the statutory framework of the Labour Relations and Industrial Disputes Act. A, the emphasis throughout is on the settlement of disputes, whether by negotiation or conciliation or a decision of the IDT, rather than upon determination of claims. B, where the dispute relates to the dismissal of a worker, the IDT has a range of remedies where it finds that the dismissal was unjustifiable. C, the IDT's award is final and conclusive, and no proceedings can be brought to impeach it in a court of law except on a point of law. The board agreed with the Court of Appeal that the IDT had its own original jurisdiction in settling disputes and therefore carries out its own inquiries. The IDT is therefore not restricted to examining evidence that was before an employer's disciplinary tribunal. Very, very important ruling, until and unless that law is changed. The other matter, Mr. Speaker, is a matter of the Ministry of Finance and the Jamaica Constabulary Force against Winsome Bennett. The appeal involved the issue of whether a person who has not been married to a member of the Jamaica Constabulary Force but had cohabited with him or her in a common law relationship and who had been declared a spouse pursuant to the Intestate Estates and Property Charges Act could receive a pension as the member's surviving spouse pursuant to the Constabulary Force Act. The court at first instance had found that the claimant, who was a common law spouse of the member of the JCF, was entitled to receive the pension.
Mr. Speaker, I ask that the member's time be extended for 15 minutes to enable her to complete her presentation.
Those in favor? Those against? As of Attorney General.
Grateful, Mr. Speaker. I won't be very much longer. So the appeal also raised the issue of which public authority had the power to determine who receives a pension, as the court had directed the Minister of Finance and the Jamaica Constabulary Force to make the pension payments to the claimant. The appeal by the government was upheld, which in essence amounted to a determination that a person involved in a common law union with a member of the constabulary force is not eligible for a pension as a surviving spouse, he or she having not been married to the member of the force at the date of death. It also determined that it is the remit of the Governor General to determine and approve pension payments under the Act, and that any order directing that the Ministry of Finance should make such payment without a determination from the Governor General would be ultra vires the Act. Please note that the pension laws have been changed, but still a very important ruling. Mr. Speaker, I will highlight one other case before I get to the closing part of my presentation dealing with judgment debts, settlements, and payment. And that is the Paul Chen Yong, Ajax Investment Limited, and Domville Limited against Eagle Merchant Bank, Jamaica, Crown Eagle Life Insurance Company Limited, and the Attorney General. The substantive hearing of this appeal concluded in November 2013. However, owing to the non-delivery of the judgment up to October 20, 2017, an application was made by the appellants for the hearing, which ended in November 2013, to be vacated and the appeal heard de novo. The appellants also sought costs of the first appeal and cost of their application to be paid by the Attorney General. The judgment was ultimately delivered prior to the hearing of the application. The appellants were successful, but they still went on to pursue their application for the de novo hearing of the appeal, and that application was heard in December 2017. Among the issues raised in the appeal are the impact on the appeal of the retirement of 3 judges without having delivered a judgment, and whether the Attorney General should bear the cost of the hearing of the appeals thrown away and the cost of the present motion. Mr. Speaker, I highlight the case, because earlier the administration came under flack when the Honorable Prime Minister sought to explain the importance of having matters in the justice sector dealt with in a timely way. On April 26 of this year, the Court of Appeal ruled that the judgment handed down after all 3 judges had retired was null and void. The appeal is to be reheard at the earliest possible time, and the court refused to grant the order sought for the Attorney General to bear the costs of the hearing of the appeal as costs thrown away and the cost of the motion. I highlight them because we really have to pay closer attention right across government to what we do, how we do what we do, how we discharge our powers, and the impact they have. There is the final division, which is the General Legal Advice Division. And very briefly, I will just say that this division of the chambers is overwhelmed with a huge caseload, but efforts are being made to improve the timeliness in which advice is given. Mr. Speaker, I therefore now turn to the final part of my presentation on judgment debts, settlements, and payments. This government, the Andrew Holness-led administration, has recognized the hardship faced by litigants who, having succeeded in the courts or having had their claims settled, have been forced to wait a lengthy period of time for payment. The long wait was due to the insufficiency of funds provided in the budget of the chambers for the payment of judgment debts or other awards over the years. The financial year 2017-2018 was, however, a landmark year for the amount of funds provided to the government to pay judgment debt. And I see the former Minister of Finance is here, and I really want to commend him, because when Minister Chuck and myself made the representation to him, he listened sympathetically, went back to his ministry, and the work was done, and the funds were provided. Really commend you, Minister. But you know, Mr. Speaker, let us not underestimate, and I'm sure you yourself understand this issue, because there are many persons who are wronged along the way, and they get judgments. Some of them are harmed and hurt and have been incapacitated, and they have to wait and wait and wait. As at March 17, the judgment debt settlement liability of the government stood at just under $445 million. During the financial year 17-18, the additional liability incurred by the government in respect of claims amounted to a total of just under $865 million, with just under $330 million arising from settlements and just over $535.5 million arising from judgments. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased, very pleased, to advise that at the end of March 2018, the government paid out a significant sum of $1,309,776,660.92 for the financial year. With the exception of interest liability, this covered the entire amount due as at March 2018. And the payment, Mr. Speaker, represented an unprecedented action by the government. Mr. Speaker, according to the records of the chambers, as at the end of May 2018, the Ministry of Justice made payments amounting to just under $78 million to claimants. I have provided a breakdown of the nature of the matters in the publication. And I urge you to look. I see some members are looking at it. It sets out the types of matters, the number of claims, the percentage of the total payment amount. I pointed out to the Minister of Health that medical negligence amounts to 8% of the payments owed, over $6 million. Yes, not very good. In respect of constitutional redress, false imprisonment, malicious prosecution, assault and battery, we have over 23% of the number, the percentage of the total claims. Mr. Speaker, for the financial year 2018-19, the approved budget of the chambers under the head of awards and special assistance pursuant to the Appropriations Act reflect an amount of approximately $462 million. If the amount provided is insufficient, I am putting the government on notice that, along with the Minister of Justice, we will once again seek additional funds with a view to satisfying the obligations that arise in the financial year. I will quickly just look behind the figures as I close, Mr. Speaker, because analysis of the figures presented is useful for us to identify trends and also to help us to seek to implement mitigating strategies. I have also included in the presentation, in the printed presentation, a table reflecting a breakdown of the majority of the payments made for the financial year 17-18. it will be seen that payments resulting from claims arising out of police action, and I know the Minister of National Security and the former Minister of National Security are listening attentively, for constitutional redress, false imprisonment, malicious prosecution, assault and battery, and unlawful seizure of property constitute approximately 52% of payments, followed by accidents at 25%, personal injury matters at 14%. Medical negligence claims were also significant at 9% of the payments made. Our chambers will intensify our efforts to work with the police, Mr. Speaker, to reduce liability from the manner in which they carry out their duties. And already we have seen marked improvements. The information is there. I will not go through in the interest of time. But in closing, Mr. Speaker, there were 303 payments made over the period April 2017 to March 2018. And of this figure, 267 or 88% of all the payments represent 88% of all the payments made for the financial year. The record of claims filed against the Crown reflect a similar concern as that relating to payments made, as the majority of matters emanate from actions of our police officers. While we do understand that the role they play in protecting and securing us often results in their having to face the dangerous and often less cooperative members of our society, we at the Chambers will continue to work with them to ensure that the instances in which complaints concerning their actions can be justified are significantly reduced. Mr. Speaker, I've also included in the booklet information for the information of those interested, an indication of the work being done by the Chambers over the last 3 years. And I do that because we've been getting requests for information of this type. I invite you to look at it. So, Mr. Speaker, I really want to conclude now by saying that the work of the Chambers, if it were to be summed up, is really to help to keep government legal. And the team is a hard-working team. And sometimes I feel really sorry because the volume of work that we're hit with and the time frame in which we're asked to turn over require a lot more resources. I give thanks for small mercies because this administration has provided what has not been provided in over 2 decades. So I end on a positive note, Mr. Speaker, and I reiterate my commitment with the team I lead at the Chambers to do all that we can within the powers vested in us to keep government legal. I thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure you will agree that we have had a full and exciting day. The last presenter gave us information that will guide us going forward in matters dealing with legal affairs. However, Mr. Speaker, it is not intended to do any further business for the day. So I ask you to adjourn this Honorable House until next week, Tuesday, at 2 p.m. That's the 10th, July the 10th. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 10th.
The motion is that the House be now adjourned until next week, Tuesday, the 10th, at 2 p.m. Those in favor? Those against? As have it. This Honorable House stands adjourned.